Road to Exodus. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam share a common origin and lineage. They all believe in the same God, Yahweh, or Jehovah, consider Jerusalem a sacred city, recognize Abraham as a prophet, and trace their faith back to him. Together, these three religious branches form the world's only monotheistic tradition. The Old Testament of the Bible serves as their shared religious text. Remarkably, monotheistic adherents now constitute 56.19% of the global population, underscoring the significance of this religious and cultural presence on Earth. Moreover, an increasing consensus asserts that only monotheistic religions qualify as true religions. Other polytheistic or atheistic belief systems lack the concept of a singular deity. Their worship focuses on 1. Natural phenomena, celestial bodies, rivers, lakes, mountains, animals, and human organs. 2. Moral philosophy, ethical teachings, gradually elevated to religious status. For instance, 1. Buddhism emphasizes the cycle of reincarnation, where accumulating good deeds in one lifetime leads to a better rebirth. 2. Taoism aims for immortality through virtuous living, with the hope of joining the ranks of immortals after death. The common thread across all religions lies in their shared commitment to kindness and benevolence. Differences arise in their beliefs' focus and direction. In the case of monotheism, historical scriptures often defy empirical proof due to their supernatural nature. The sole basis for faith becomes miracles, seeing is believing. Thus, the Bible is regarded as both a repository of divine will for believers and a collection of allegorical stories for non-believers. Any religion advocating violence, war, debauchery, or terror is unequivocally considered a cult. Such cults harm society, act as spiritual epidemics, and become enemies of humanity, necessitating their eradication. The first part of the Bible, known as the Torah or 5 books of Moses, constitutes the core of monotheistic faith. Written in ancient Hebrew by the masterful Moses around 1500 BCE, it was later translated into Greek during the Hellenistic era. After the establishment of the Roman Catholic Church, the Bible was uniformly translated into Standard Latin. Following the Reformation, it was rendered into nearly every language worldwide. Ancient texts are inherently complex and cryptic. For instance, even experts can only interpret about 60% of Chinese oracle bone script. Given the multiple layers of translation, the Bible cannot remain entirely unaltered. Consequently, various interpretations of the Bible have emerged, authored by both insiders and outsiders. Some interpretations are imaginative, while others are speculative or sensational, explaining Bible stories in plain language, stripping away mythological hues, abbreviating numerous names of people and places, can yield a coherent and accessible narrative. This positive cultural endeavor allows the Bible to transition from a safe to a bedside table. Exodus, the second volume of the 5 books of Moses, is a crucial part of the Old Testament. It recounts the tumultuous journey of the ancient Hebrews from their sorrowful existence in Egypt to their development as a nation. It describes Moses' covenant with Yahweh, the 10 Commandments, and the unique status of the Israelites as the sole bearers of the Ark of the Covenant. Through a series of classic events, it unfolds their return to the Promised Land. While interpretations may differ across theology, philosophy, and literature, historians need only preserve its logical coherence, allowing for creative exploration. Feel free to explore the Bible beyond its safekeeping in vaults, place it on your bedside table, and engage with its rich narratives. The historical context of the Exodus should not be simplistically traced solely based on the place names mentioned in ancient texts. After all, those names from 3,000 to 4,000 years ago may no longer exist or have undergone significant changes. For instance, let's consider the Sinai Peninsula and Mount Sinai in Egypt. According to records, the naming of Mount Sinai is associated with Saint Helena, the mother of Emperor Constantine the Great, in the 4th century. Legend has it that in a dream, God revealed to her the geographical location of Mount Sinai and instructed her to make a pilgrimage there. She personally journeyed to Mount Sinai to search for relics from the time of Moses. Since then, people have referred to this mountain as Mount Sinai, and the surrounding peninsula became known as the Sinai Peninsula. However, a significant challenge to this Mount Sinai narrative arises from the emergence of the Midian hypothesis in the last 30 years. Midian was a town on the Arabian Peninsula, visible across the sea from the Sinai Peninsula. This theory is based on the discovery of Almond Mountain near Midian, which aligns geographically and archaeologically with the description in the Bible. Unfortunately, it has not gained widespread acceptance within mainstream religious thought. Perhaps the main reason is that Midian was prosperous and habitable, unlike the desolate wilderness. After all, Moses spent the second 40 years of his life in Midian. During his time in Egypt, Moses had intervened when he witnessed an injustice, accidentally killing a man. He fled to Midian, where he lived incognito, married, and led an ordinary and peaceful life. Of course, the primary motivation for leaving Egypt was the Hebrews' desire to return to Canaan. If they had safely reached the prosperous land of Midian and settled there, it's plausible that they might have chosen to stay. At least it's challenging to find a reason for a 40-year stay in Midian. Beyond religious beliefs, there are archaeological aspects of Egyptian history. Some widely accepted non-biblical evidence includes 1. Migration of foreigners to Egypt, around 1800 BCE. Egyptian tomb paintings extensively depict the arrival and settlement of Semitic people in Egypt. This period corresponds to the Hyksos era, during which Joseph served as a vizier in Egypt, as described in the Bible. Archaeological findings related to official titles, prison systems, famines, and grain storage align with biblical accounts. 2. Joseph as vizier in Egypt. Archaeology professor Byatak from the University of Vienna discovered many royal rings in the ancient Egyptian city of Avaris, inscribed with the Hebrew name Yaakov. It is believed that these rings belonged to Joseph's servants, representing his authority. This provides compelling physical evidence for Joseph's existence in Egypt. 3. Camo stele. The Camo stele, dating back 3,500 years, records Pharaoh Chamos driving out foreign rulers, ending the Hyksos era. This aligns with the historical context described in the first chapter of the book of Exodus. Considering these three archaeological pieces of evidence, along with various human and temporal perspectives, and emphasizing Moses' military strategy, we can reconstruct the Exodus story. It involves the Hebrews fleeing Egypt, the pursuit by the Egyptian army, the crossing of the Red Sea, the wilderness journey, 40 years of manna sustenance, and more. In this version, Joseph, who had risen to prominence as Egypt's vizier, was one of Jacob's 12 sons. Initially sold into slavery by his jealous brothers, he eventually ended up in Egypt, where his wisdom and loyalty led him to become a powerful figure in Pharaoh's court. When there was a great famine in the Canaan region, Jacob led his sons to Egypt in search of sustenance. Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. Eventually, Joseph forgave his brothers for their betrayal, revealed his true identity, and reunited with them. He then settled his family of 70 in the fertile eastern Nile Delta region of Egypt. For 430 years, this family lived peacefully, and their population grew to 2 million. At that time, the indigenous Egyptian population numbered only 6 million. The rise of this foreign group began to raise suspicions among the Egyptian pharaohs. As the saying goes, can one sleep soundly with a sword hanging over the bed? The pharaoh worried that these highly capable Hebrew people might rebel and eventually replace the ruling class. Consequently, the pharaoh began to mistreat and restrict these foreigners. The suffering endured by the Hebrew migrants in Egypt was similar to the plight of their descendants in modern Europe. Their refusal to assimilate, their steadfast preservation of their culture, faith, and religious practices, and their avoidance of intermarriage with other ethnic groups led to their mistreatment. Thus, during World War II, European countries commonly discriminated against Jews due to this historical context. This resilience is an inherent trait of the Jewish people. The Hebrew people's enslavement in Egypt became unbearable, especially when the pharaoh ordered the killing of Hebrew male infants to control their population. Rebellion brewed among them. During this time, a Hebrew baby named Moses was placed in a basket and set adrift on the Nile River. Fortunately, the pharaoh's daughter discovered the basket while bathing in the river. Despite knowing the child's Hebrew origin, she decided to adopt him and provide him with a good education. At the age of 40, Moses witnessed an Egyptian mistreating a Hebrew, and he intervened to protect the Hebrew. In the process, he accidentally killed the Egyptian. To escape punishment, Moses fled to a distant land, settling in the Arabian Peninsula. When Moses was 80, God called him to lead his people back to Canaan, the land flowing with milk and honey, promised to their ancestors. Moses obeyed and risked his life to visit the pharaoh, requesting permission to lead his people back to their homeland. The pharaoh initially obstructed their return but eventually relented. Knowing that the Hebrews were no match for the Canaanites, the pharaoh allowed them to leave. Moses, with his wisdom, saw through the pharaoh's intentions and led 2 million people, along with livestock and supplies, away from their settlement, heading east. The Hebrews remained unaware of their destination, believing they would return home within a month. However, Moses suddenly ordered a change of direction, turning south instead of east. The Pharaoh's scouts reported this unexpected development, and the Pharaoh panicked, fearing the Hebrews would find a new foothold, grow stronger, and eventually challenge Egypt. He assembled a large army to pursue them. Moses once again changed course, leading the Hebrews through the shallow waters and marshes at the end of the Red Sea. The pursuing Egyptian army followed them into the wetlands. Suddenly, a massive rockslide occurred on the right side, followed by a torrential flood that engulfed the Egyptian soldiers. Moses had strategically placed boulders upstream to create a dam, which he breached at the opportune moment, drowning the Egyptian forces. This tactic of using water as a weapon against a stronger enemy was a common strategy in ancient times, either fire or water. All it required was a well-hidden plan to deceive the enemy. Moses, fearing Pharaoh's wrath, retaliated vigorously. He urged the Israelites to march southward until they reached the vast mountains in the southern part of the Sinai Peninsula. There, at the foot of the mountains near a water source, they set up camp. The Israelites adopted a strategy akin to dragons entering the sea and tigers ascending the mountains. They could advance or retreat freely, complementing each other. Their survival depended on the adage, rely on the mountains for sustenance and the sea for nourishment. The camp nestled by the mountains and water not only provided abundant natural resources, but also served as a reliable base for their struggle in the mountainous region. Without pursuers, they could live peacefully at the foot of the mountains. However, if they spotted any pursuers, they swiftly relocated higher up the mountain. There, they had prepared defensive measures in advance, stockpiles of stones and hay bales to fend off enemies. As the saying goes, one man guards the pass, and 10,000 cannot break through. When enemy troops approached, they executed their plan. 1. They hurled a barrage of stones, smashing the enemy forces. 2. They threw ignited hay bales, setting the enemy ablaze. 3. Finally, they used bows and arrows to deal with any remaining foes. Pharaoh observed this formidable defense and realized it was impregnable. He postponed his attack, maintaining a distant camp to monitor the Israelites' movements. Whenever a vulnerability appeared, he struck immediately. Aware of their inferiority against the Egyptian army, the Israelites remained within their camp, maintaining constant vigilance. Over time, the Egyptian forces faced insurmountable challenges in the harsh wilderness. Eventually, they voluntarily withdrew. Although the Israelites regained their freedom, they grappled with uncertainty about their next steps. Moses ascended the mountain to pray, seeking divine guidance. On his return, he carried 2 stone tablets inscribed with the 10 Commandments. First, they established discipline, then organized themselves, implemented military management, conducted field training, crafted weapons, and built chariots. After nearly 40 years of relentless effort, they formed a militarized fortress community and a well-armed fighting force. With renewed determination, they set forth toward Canaan. To conceal their intentions and confuse spies sent by various factions, they intentionally took circuitous routes, set up deceptive formations, and spread false information. Eventually, they crossed the Jordan River and entered Canaan. By this time, the generation that had left Egypt, including Moses, had mostly passed away. Joshua, Moses' capable assistant, assumed leadership, leading the entire tribe in battle against the Canaanites. They fought until victory was secured, fulfilling their ancestors' desire to return home. This process mirrored a perfect cycle, even more remarkable than modern Jewish nationalism. This version of the Exodus narrative emphasizes themes of warfare, logical development, and straightforward language. It serves different purposes. 1. Believers, as preparatory reading before delving into the Bible. 2. Doubters, provides a self-justifying path toward religious conversion. 3. Skeptics, difficult to find weak points to attack.